I mean, Pinky and the Brain don't ever get out of the lab, do they? I don't think they ever make it outside of the lab, so I doubt they're able to beat Arlo or Reggie, who run kingdoms and keep people in check all the time and defeat frog hordes and bat hordes. So I think Reggie or Arlo could easily take Pinky and the Brain. Well, if you haven't seen Wallace and Gromit: A Grand Day Out, you should watch that because they answer the question. It is made of cheese. Obviously, you'd have to try it. What's moon cheese taste like? I think you got to give it a go. If it was a blue cheese, though, probably not. Cookies, chewy every time, crunchy. You're just getting crummies everywhere, and I can't be dealing with crumbs in the beard. That's just not a good decision at all. I'd say that was just, we really wanted to do this. As me, Dan, and Martin, we all went to uni together to learn to make games. Breaking into the AAA side of things is very, very hard. And we knew we had lots of ideas for games that we wanted to make personally, so indie always appealed to us. So once you head down that route and you've got your own company and you're working on something that you love and that you've birthed, basically, the motivation just comes naturally. You want to see that thing through to fruition. You want to see that thing out. I think if you're a game developer, at the end of the day, you want people playing your games. You love making games because you want to see people play it and you want to have an impact on people's lives. So that's what keeps me driven, is like, yes, I've got to set up 500 weapons and armors in a spreadsheet, but at the end of the day, that means somebody's got a weapon that they really love or an armor they want to eventually craft, and that's the cool stuff that, keeps you going. So yeah, I went to university. Me, Dan, and mine, we all met at university. We all studied games art and design at Norwich University Arts in the UK. And yeah, we did that for 3 years. We learned the basics of game design, concept art, a little bit of game development in there as well, but it was more a design and art side of things. And that worked well. Luckily we met each other, that led us to getting funding and that sort of thing, so that was really great for us. Would I recommend it for someone else? It depends. Like, if you can afford that and you reckon it's going to be useful for your development, then obviously go for it. I'd say the most important thing that's worked for us is the people that we've met. Less so the course, because you could probably learn that stuff through the internet if you really wanted to. It's meeting the people that think like you and work like you, and that allowed us to build the basis of our team. So my number one advice would be start making something yourself. So get on Unity, get some tutorials, it's all free, and start talking to people online or going to local meetups and finding people that you can build a team with to get funding to start your studio. One thing I would say as well, if you do want to go down that route, lots of events like PAX, like EGX in the UK, they all have business sides to them where you can go for indie funding. So definitely check that out. It's like speed dating. You go from publisher to publisher with your demo or your pitch deck, and it's a good way to meet publishers and start that process of getting funding. I mean, it's a tough question. Like, if you want to get into a AAA company and work just as an artist or a developer or a coder, then I think at that point you need to actually be someone who is very good. Not saying the best ever, because junior up, you can work your way through, but you've got to be someone that is quite gifted and willing to put in the hours to become better. If you're in the indie field, I think, yeah, you're still probably very, very good, but you need to be a broader range of skills because you're not doing just one exact thing every time. But I'd say you can always learn to be better. I mean, every artist can always get better, every coder can always get better, every designer can always get better. So I don't think there is a ceiling at which you're like, oh, I'm never going to reach that. So I would just say, work on what you want to work on. There's lots of tutorials for Unity online. There's lots of tutorials for Photoshop. There's lots of tutorials for better writing. So there's always something online that's going to help you work with yourself, work with people that you can meet online to get something like a demo. And from there, you're going to be able to build a bigger team, get funding, and practice more. And practice makes perfect. So I'd say no, you can make your way. It's just all about hard work. When we first started developing Tales of Iron, we didn't really plan to have a narrator. We wanted it to be purely all done through the bubbles. But obviously, as development progressed, we kind of knew that wasn't going to work. It was going to be too big a game for that to actually feasibly working over that scale and that time. So the publisher said, why don't we talk about having a narrator? And they was like, who would you like? And in our minds, we was like, we want Doug Cocker, we want the voice of the White Wolf, you know, that'll fit our dark, grim world. That'd be really a good match for us, thinking he's never going to want to work with a small indie like us. So the publisher, they went off, they showed him the artwork, they showed him what we was working on, and, you know, Doug loved it. He was proper into it. And, you know, working with Doug is a dream. He's such a nice guy. He's so easy to work with. He's always happy to, you know, do one more take, change it to what you want. He even, you know, improvises and comes up with stuff that takes the story to points that we didn't even think about, adds in Easter eggs that we didn't even think about. So yeah, we had to thank the publisher for sorting that out. That's really been good for us. I mean, we'd love it, of course we would. We'd love for you know, people to take Tales of Iron and do things with it. My dream, and I've mentioned it before, is Kingdoms 2 Crowns. That, I think, doing a Tales of Iron version of that would be great. Building your little rat village, setting up towers with your little rat archers in it whilst you play as Reggie and Arlo, riding around on the back of a bug. I think that would be a great, you know, addition. And then, you know, Brawlhalla or whatever, having Reggie or Arlo as a character in a fighting game would be really cool. So yeah, we're completely open to that sort of thing. We have never worked in the AAA side of things, so how I say it's done is not necessarily how it's done. And with us, it's, I'd say, a lot easier because there's only 5 of us, so it's not like you need to get hundreds of people from different departments together to work out who's done what and where and when. So the piecing together really is kind of my job. So we have one guy that makes, you know, makes the characters, animates the characters, and gives them their brain of how they fight. We have one guy that does all of the artwork. Then we have 2 coders, and then there's me. So I write the story, I set up the levels, I then place the AI into those levels in the different encounters, and then piece them together in their quests. So I'd say the way we make games, the thing that drives it through is the story. So the story sets out what we want the game to achieve, where it starts, where it ends, what happens in between. That all dictates the level design, the quest design. All of those things are then influenced by that. Quest design and level design interact really closely because you have to make sure that combat encounters and saves and health are all paced out, as well as your story beats. Once that's all done, we know there's an encounter. We have to then level that through the game so it gets harder as you go through. You know, you get your upgrades at certain times, and then we plop the AI into that in ways that allow that to get that difficulty curve. And then almost separate, but in some ways combined, the world art goes in on its own timeline, but if there is something in the quest that says this changes or that happens, then that's a bit of a crossover. But that's a very high level look at it. I'd say until you're actually in it, it's impossible to kind of explain exactly how everything comes together. You just have to keep chugging on, keep going. But the way we kind of manage everything is we do like morning sprints. So we each month we set out, this is what we want to achieve by the end of the month, and then daily we'll just say this is what we're doing to head towards that goal, and this is how we're going to get there. So breaking it down into simple tasks makes it feel more achievable. This is a tough one to answer because we don't strictly adhere to here's concept, here's development, here's alpha, here's beta, here's release. That I think that's more of a bigger team AAA side of things to keep people on track. We do have a concept phase, normally takes 2 to 3 months, but you know, it can take less, it can take longer depending on if we start development and things change, or all sorts of factors can affect that. Development is normally 2 years to alpha, roughly, if we're adding that. Alpha we're classing as like a first playable all the way through, and then from there another 6 months to, you know, polish bugs, get everything to a release state. But that's a really high level concept thing, and they're not strict lines. Like sometimes you'll think you're at alpha and you realize parts of the game aren't working, or there's crazy bugs, so that'll take you back into a development process. There'll be points where parts of the story aren't working, so you need to add bits, that takes you back into the concept phase. So, you know, it's a fluid, continuous thing. I don't think it's as rigid as this part, this part, this part, this part. if that makes sense. I'd say initially we set out that we wanted that slow, weighted, reactive combat. We liked the concept for our combat of you really have to understand the enemy. You have to be watching the enemy and you have to react to that in order to make the space for you to attack. That's why we got rid of things like the stamina bar. We didn't want you looking at a stamina bar to know when you could do something. We wanted you focused on the enemy and reacting to that accordingly, because then you understand the combat on a much deeper level. And because of that design philosophy, that then led us into, right, we want you reacting, so this is why we've got these different indicators. We want you to use the full spectrum of the combat abilities you have, so different color indicators mean you are forced to do different things. So we had a philosophy going into it, but obviously to make that happen you have to iterate through that. So I would say yes, it was part of the final result was part of the initial vision, but that was only achieved through iteration through the development process. I think there's like 1,000 unique weapons, armors, pauldrons, helmets, shields, bows, guns, all of that. There's just so many. But it was more the case that we designed the monsters. The monsters was more important, right? The second to second combat is more important than the weapon and armors. So once we built that combat and that was fun, and the design of that monster would then would create the concept for the armor, because we wanted anything you like Monster Hunter, whenever you kill a monster, your weapon and armor that you get from crafting materials from that needs to be represented in the armor. So in that way we could take the pieces and create unique designs per monster. So that was more the process for it. But yeah, that took hours, days, weeks, months, and again all done just by Dan. So yeah, a lot of time there. I don't know. Like I don't know if everyone gets it all the time, but I think it's a nice little thing. Is in the Golden Forest with the owls, there's two badgers called Marco and Lorenzo. One wears red, one wears green. They're meant to be a little sneaky nod to Mario and Luigi. Obviously they're brothers that grow mushrooms and eat mushrooms all the time. And they have a little side quest where they have an egg. And if you hatch that egg, a little lizard comes out of it called Yoki, like Yoshi. So I think that's a cool Easter egg, and it takes a little bit of time for people to get there to get it. So I like that. But as a vegetarian, I just like cheese. I just like a standard margarita pizza. But if I was to add anything, olives. Always black olives. Love olives on a pizza. It's a top one. Like again, we might do it completely different to everyone else. So take this with a pinch of salt. Our concept phase is done in like 3 ways. So initially we start and we're talking about what we want to make, how we want to make it, what sort of story we want to tell, what mechanics we want to have. This is all just chucking it out there. And then we'll break that down into somebody, normally Dan, will make like a game design document. So this document lays out, here's the mechanics, breaks down the mechanics into the different ways they work, and gives a layout of how they would work with the controller and how enemies react to them, all of that sort of thing. Then we'll have a concept art doc. So Martin will break it down into, here's the different areas we've spoken about, here's some visual identity or visual aids of what it should look like, and here's some concept sketches of that. And then I'll break down, here's the story, here's how the quest breakdown looks like. And then you've got these 3 documents that act as pillars of like, this is what we said we wanted to make, how we think it should look, how we think it should work. And then, as I said previously, you start development, and as you start to build things, you'll find holes in it, and you have to go back to that phase to kind of fix those things, go back into development till you work your way through to alpha and beta and all of those areas. So the thing this has happened with in both Tales of Iron 1 and Tales of Iron 2 is we have tried to implement jump combat, and every time we implement jump combat, we lose that nice weighted feel of Tales of Iron. As soon as you're jumping in the air and slashing and all of that sort of thing, it removes any of the like slow reactive combat that we like Tales of Iron to be. So that's something twice we've been like, oh, this would be cool. Oh crap, it doesn't work how we'd hope it would work. So I'd say jump combat every time. No, I mean like, if there's a bug or a glitch, then that's fine. That's just part of the game. I'll just restart. I'm sure if that game dev is anything like me, they absolutely hate that that's in there. They probably didn't even know it was in there. They've played that game so many times, and yet as soon as you release that game and it's out there, there's going to be a million bugs you didn't even know existed because there's just so many more people playing it. So no, I don't fix it. I know that game dev's going to get to fixing it eventually, so it'll get fixed. I've got plenty of my own bugs to fix, so I'm not going to try. I try and spend my free time playing games rather than making games if I can. So yeah, of course, yeah, we've looked at a lot of those like anthropomorphic animals. So Wind in the Willows, Mouse Guard, all of those sort of little creatures living within a human society, I'd say is the thing that interests us. Like I said in the podcast, directly the art style is inspired by Eastern European block printing. So when you carve the wood and you cover it in ink and stamp it, so that's why all of that artwork has those black lines around it. So that was the art direction, but that kind of also led into the story direction as well, because we wanted it to feel like a fairy tale. You know, we wanted it to feel like it was a simple story that felt like a Brothers Grimm fairy tale, and then that dark art style and that dark grim storyline mixed together kind of really helped to create the world of Tales of Iron. So I'd say they were the main motivators. And then games wise, like I say, The Witcher obviously leans a lot into that Slavic mythology. It's got that dark gritty world, so I'd say that was a big influence for us. And then things like, you know, Game of Thrones, The Elder Scrolls, Lord of the Rings, all of these like high fantasy things are really drive us forward in terms of story and world. I mean, something that was really cool that we didn't really get enough time to, you know, play with, but it's a cool concept, is our first game, The Lost Bear, was a 2D VR action platformer. So you sat in a chair in VR, and in front of you was like a puppet show which the 2D game played out on, and you could interact with that through the controller, and then around you the world reflected what you were seeing, and it changed depending on what you did in the game. I think that's a cool concept, and I think if we'd had more time to work on that game, we could have definitely done more with it. And I think there's a lot more that if another studio wanted to take that idea, that they could do with it as well. So I think that's a cool feature. I'd say probably cheddar. I'd go basic cheddar, but I don't know if it's a type of cheese, but I am partial to a cheese string every now and then. As an 8-year-long vegetarian, I'd say my answer is probably very different to everyone else. I don't know if this is a thing that you have in America, but hash browns, if you don't have them, they're like potato that's been like mashed together but not mashed potato, and then it's put into like normally like a triangle or a circle. You probably get them at McDonald's actually, so yeah, you probably do have them. Hash browns are my favourite. Worst part of a full English breakfast though is the runny egg yolk. That is disgusting. I love the Red Dead series, but I very much love Red Dead 2. The way that they have, like, you can disappear into that game for probably years without actually playing the main game. So I'm going to rate it highly. It's like an 8 or a 9, the gameplay in Red Dead. I love it. I love the story. I love talking to people. I love upgrading my weapons. I love upgrading my gear. I love going out to hunt to upgrade that stuff. I love that loop. So I'm rating Red Dead pretty highly, 8 or a 9, maybe even a 10 on a good day. Many, but I'd say Ocarina of Time when you become adult Link. That's great. Ocarina of Time when you get a pony and you can start riding around on the back of a horse. You know, they're all crazy moments from childhood. But a random one is Sunset Riders. At the end of the first level, you're fighting this guy and he's in his house, and he'll pop up in one of 6 windows. You have to shoot whilst he shoots back at you. And when you defeat him, he falls out of the window and falls on the floor. And for some reason, it always sticks in my head. His line is, "Bury me with my money." And then he just like classic death. For some reason, that is in my head all the time, and I always quote it. So even though I haven't got any money, but I always quote that. So that's a memory that's lodged in my head for some random reason. People that you might not know, I really like Stephen Graham. A movie called This Is England where he plays a character called Combo. The premise of the movie is horrible, but he's just a really good actor in it. He plays a horrible person, but he's really good in it. So Stephen Graham for that. And then I'd probably say Bob Hoskins. I really like Bob Hoskins. He's from my part of the world. He's a fun character. He's always a fun character. Like Who Shot Roger Rabbit? He's Mario in the old Mario and Luigi movie, so I've got to say Bob Hoskins. But if I was to pick between Jack Black and Jim Carrey, I would probably say Jim Carrey. I like Jim Carrey movies, obviously he's hilarious, but also the way he's changed after Hollywood and the way he sees the world, I quite like that as well. But also big shout out to Jack Black's mum with the getting us into space. So yeah, I think that'd be my answer. It just grows like that. I think I've been left with no hair on my head, but I've got hair everywhere else, so I don't know, it just grows like that. I don't even have any ginger relatives in my family, so I don't know why it's ginger either, but I'm happy to have it, otherwise I would be a complete egghead. Simple answer, it says it in the name, it's cheesecake, it's cake, it's got to be a cake. We don't really do waffles so much over here, like you can get them, but they're not like the biggest of things. I'd say pancakes are way bigger, but it's less American pancakes and more like French crepes, so I'd say pancakes in this situation. I keep getting about 75% of the way to setting up a store and making t-shirts or tote bags, and then making games gets in the way, and I'd much rather make games. So I'd like to, hopefully one day we'll get there. We did try to make a plushie at one point, but we didn't get enough funding for that, but yeah, it's something we're looking at. My biggest interest is I like gardening. I like growing fruits and vegetables and stuff, so I've actually built in the back garden underground greenhouse, a submerged greenhouse. So the greenhouse is like 4 foot underground, and then we built like a plastic triangular top to it. So what that does is, because the sun can get in and then heat up the ground around the greenhouse, it gets warmer sooner in the year. So normally you'd be planting your vegetables, say April, June-ish sort of time, whereas now I can start planting like end of February and go all the way to October, November-ish. So that's something I really like. And no, I haven't actually been able to add it into games because we've had a king and a warden of the north, so I don't think they really have a lot of time for growing vegetables, but it would be something that would be cool to do in the future. I'd like to do that. So yeah, this is the $1 million question, you know. What's fun for me isn't necessarily fun for you, what's fun for you isn't necessarily fun for the next person. So the concept of fun is very hard to pin down. So you just have to make something that you enjoy, and then hope there's other people out there that enjoy it as well. That's the basis. But how do we come to that point? So the way we see it is we build mechanics that we like to play. We like sword and shield combat. We like Souls-like dodge rolls. We like RPG, exploring and quests. So they were all things that we enjoy. So they become like our building blocks. And once you've got those building blocks, you start playing with them in not a straight game. You're not going straight into game development, here's levels. You build what we refer to as a grey box. So a grey box means you can set up basic encounters or different scenarios that allow you to test out how things are going to work, and you build a prototype of what your levels are one level would look like. And once that one level is fun, you've got a blueprint for how all of your levels should look, feel, play, and that way you know if this is fun, different variations of this should also be fun, and then you can start to build that out into the rest of your game. I think probably the main moment was when we first got the player controller working for Reggie in the first game. So we first had him running around, throwing his shield up, slashing his sword, jumping, you know, like the basics of combat and movement were there. And even though you weren't fighting an enemy, it was like you could feel that there was going to be a game here. You know, you could feel that there was more mechanics than just a character running around. You could feel how that movement of combat would work. So I think that was the first moment where we was like, yeah, this is good, we might actually have something here.